All right, good morning, everybody. We're here to announce a federal emergency relief fund, $500 million. We've discussed this with the legislative leadership. Vote on this as part of the special session. We found that over the last month, with the shutdown in particular, there's been a lot of on again and off again, a lot of risk to our citizens. I think you saw just in the last week how severe that was when it came to SNAP benefits, food support, otherwise known as food stamps. And we were required to provide it, then you couldn't provide it, then you'd be penalized if you provide it. So last week we said we're going to provide full SNAP benefits through the month of November to take care of people. You know, earlier on, we were probably the first state in the country to, make our deal with food share, about 3 million meals a week just to take care of people, given all the anxiety and the change coming out of Washington, D.C. Probably the first state in the country to say we're going to make full payment on WIC, women, infant, and children, so there's no risk there. Maybe we'll know about SNAP by the end of this week and what we can expect from the federal government. Maybe not. Maybe we'll know by the end of this week what we can expect in terms of LIHEAP, which is fuel oil support for people needed for heating support. That's about $80 million. So between SNAP and the food support and LIHEAP, we think $500 million is a number that takes us through to the regular session coming up in February, at which point we'll be in regular course of order. We'll see what, if anything, we've got to do going forward with a full legislature in place. So I'm really pleased that we're able to come to this position and give citizens of Connecticut some confidence and comfort. We're there and we've got your back. And I wouldn't be able to do it with Senate President Marty Looney.
Thank you, Governor. Thank you so much. Thank you, Governor. I want to thank the Governor so much for coming to that consensus agreement on the $500 million fund as being a necessary number. As we all know, the situation is quite volatile. The federal government seemed to change its position on SNAP at least 3 times over the weekend. So, but at least now we have created a fund that will be able to deal with that if necessary, but also now we're thinking that the larger issue may have to do with backfilling for mitigation somehow on the Affordable Care Act subsidies, which is right now in severe jeopardy. And but again, we have now created a fund to bridge us over until February. We don't know what the particulars will be, but as of right now, Connecticut is well positioned to make sure that these hardships are just going to be dealt with. It seems that the federal government has created almost kind of a Sophie's Choice dilemma, if anybody's familiar with that novel by William Styron and the movie with Meryl Streep based on that, of setting up those who are very needy and needing SNAP on one category and those who are in need of the insurance subsidies on the other, and saying, choose one or the other, but one is going to have to be let go. And that's just a terrible and heartless position for a national government to take regarding its own people. So, but I wanted to, it's exciting to be here with the Governor to look forward to this agreement, the session. The House will be coming in Wednesday, we'll be coming in Thursday, and at this point would like to introduce Speaker Matt Ritter.
Thanks, Marty. I want to say some thank yous, and then I'll make a couple comments. I want to thank the Governor. I want to thank the Treasurer. I know that it's not easy to negotiate things, particularly over the summertime into the fall when we're not in regular session. We were confident as a caucus that we were right that this fund was important, even before the government shutdown. It only became more important as the government shut down. And again, whether it's going to end in January or February, we don't know. There's a lot of volatility, not only with SNAP, frankly, with the Washington, D.C. right now. And the fund, I think, becomes more important. It's a sign to Connecticut residents that we have a backstop to fill you whether we're in regular session or we're not in regular session. I want to thank OPM. I want to thank the Secretary and his team. I know they worked very hard on this. And I was driving my son, smelling his Axe hard in the car, but I was dealing with it on the way to soccer on Saturday morning. I got a call from Commissioner Barton Reeves, who had been working nonstop for days to try to get the SNAP cards funded over the weekend. And she called me to apologize because she said, I don't know. The advice is changing. And I said, an apology from you? You don't need to apologize to anybody. State government, with people like Commissioner Barton Reeves, worked overtime to make sure this happened for our residents of the state of Connecticut. And I hope people who are sometimes skeptical of government, and I get it, right? It's not perfect, understand the amount of work that went in dealing with the fluctuations from the guidance from the federal government to get people their benefits. And when we sent that email out on Saturday night, I've never in all my years in the legislature, gotten such a positive response from people in my email blast than when we said we fully funded SNAP. Independents, R's, D's, people were very happy that Connecticut stepped up. And I just want to introduce who's going to go next is Representative Candelora, our House leader, minority leader. You know, if I was ever the Speaker of a chamber that left town while people went hungry, I would resign in 5 seconds. You could have my gavel and I'd go back to my private life. Culture is really, really important. And the governor's done a wonderful job in his years of creating a culture here. And I know in the House, we've tried very hard to create a culture, not of universal agreement, not that there's not Republicans and Democrats, but we always have to communicate. And the worst case scenario is that you shut down and you stop talking to one another. Vinny could always take the easier path, right, which is ignore my phone calls, which can be early in the morning sometimes and constant, quite frankly. And he always is honest and forthright. And he said to me, we're not going to let people go hungry. How can I help? So I don't know what goes on in Washington. I'm not here to lambaste anybody or criticize anybody. But in Connecticut, you have a culture where people of all parties said, enough is enough. We're going to do better by our residents and by our citizens. So just as I thanked the governor's staff and his commissioners for the hard work they did, I can be criticized by any Democrat, go right ahead. We would not be here today without the work of my colleague in the Senate, Marty Looney, and Representative Candelora, and I'm glad to introduce him. Thanks, Vin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I appreciate the kind words, and I also want to thank the governor, the treasurer, Erick Russell, Senator Martin Looney, of course, our lieutenant governor, coming together today to show a different path, not just for the state of Connecticut, for the country. We don't know what's going to happen in Washington, D.C., and it's pretty frustrating to watch the politics leverage programs like SNAP in order to try to achieve what individuals think is best for them. When in fact, at some point you need to take a pause, recognize what you're doing, and find a different way. And I think it's something what we've done in the state of Connecticut. We've been blessed with a $4.3 billion rainy day fund. You know, being a fiscal conservative, obviously, you want to make sure that fund is healthy, and I'm glad it is. But today is a day I think that we need to prop it up and create this federal fund, essentially, to help those individuals that are impacted by the government shutdown. And so I think while we're not sure, hopefully that continuing resolution is voted on by the end of the week. If it's not, we will be giving the governor the tools to be able to supplant those programs that are so important to our residents in Connecticut. And so I'm pleased to be able to stand in support of this, and thank you for all your hard work.
No problem. Good morning, everyone. So first, just want to say thank you to the governor. Thank you to legislative leadership for spearheading this initiative and taking this really important step. As treasurer, my job is to make sure that I am safeguarding and managing the state's finances, both thinking about what's right in front of us in terms of that short-term management, but how are we also set up to have stability, right, and to make sure that we are able to make the moves and support initiatives in the state that we need to. And that's really what this fund is about. We've seen uncertainty on the federal level. We've seen a budget that's passed that really guts a lot of the programs that many in our state rely on in a critical way. And this fund is about having those resources and flexibility to make the decisions that we need to. And so, you know, when we look at the creation of this fund, and it's in line with what we've done in terms of being fiscally responsible as a state. Creating additional reserves, having that flexibility is fiscally responsible. It's the fiscally responsible thing to do, and that's in line with everything that we've done to this point. It also builds on the progress that we've made in terms of addressing many of the longstanding challenges we've had with unfunded pension liabilities. In addition to creating this fund, we will still be putting an additional $1.5 billion into our pension fund, which will bring us over the $10 billion mark of additional contributions into our pension fund since 2021. And what that's doing is lowering our fixed costs, creating more room in our budget for us to continue to invest in families in our state. We're also able to get the compounding effect of getting strong returns on the funds that we're putting into the pension fund. So I just thank the governor, leadership for really stepping up on this initiative, making sure that in Connecticut we can continue to do the things that we need to do to make sure residents in the state don't have to think about where their next meal is coming from, can keep a roof over their head, and can make sure that their families are taken care of. With that, I would like to turn it over to the Lieutenant Governor, Susan Bysiewicz.
Thank you, Mr. Treasurer. Thank you so much. Well, good morning, everyone. And I think today we are sending a very strong message that is bipartisan, and that's that no matter what, we will stand up and take care of the people of Connecticut in the face of the longest federal shutdown that we've ever had, and in the face of cruelty and confusion and chaos in Washington. And I just can't tell you how frustrating and disappointing and maddening it's been to get calls from constituents about their SNAP benefits, and to have 1 in 10 people in our state depending on those. And so I just want to say thank you so much to our DSS Commissioner, Andrea Barton-Reeves, for being very creative and figuring out a way to make sure on Saturday, after the governor decided we were going to stand and fund those SNAP cards, that she was able to do that in a very timely way so that people could get the food that they need. And I want to also say that we've led the way here in Connecticut to every other state, showing that we will step up when our SNAP recipients need food and when our WIC recipients need food, so that pregnant moms and their babies would get fed. And we're going to continue to stand up for the people of Connecticut. And I'm very proud of our legislative leaders on both sides of the aisle that have come together to stand in support of our families. And I hope that Washington takes a page from our playbook, because we are showing what leadership looks like. And with that, we'll take on-topic questions.
How exactly is this fund being structured? How's it work? Who gets to decide how to spend it?
So this is $500 million that would otherwise go to paying down pensions. We're keeping that as reserve that we have between now and the regular session in February to allocate to meet these immediate needs. So I would be making a recommendation saying this is how I'd spend money on WIC and on SNAP and on LIHEAP and other priorities that we may have. And then that would go to the legislative leadership on both sides of the aisle, the 6 leaders, and they'd say, I like this idea or I don't.
What happens if they don't like the idea? What if it's a vote 5-1? I mean, what does that mean?
That means that I made a proposal to fund LIHEAP at a certain point, and they have a right to say, I don't want you to fund LIHEAP at that amount.
We can vote to reject.
They can vote to reject. There you
What
go.
are the parameters of
by
that?
the full legislature. Just
No, the leadership, the 6 leaders, right?
Yeah, let me just to clarify, right? So in the lawyers, this is where OPM was very helpful in our OFA, right? We're not in session, right? So the appropriation authority has been given to the governor to make those appropriations. To avoid us having to go back into special session, which nobody wants, including us over the holidays, we gave the governor more latitude. However, Senate and us worked on this. We could reject, okay? So we can't approve, but if the governor did something that we didn't agree with or we thought was not responsive, then you could vote to reject it, and then it would not go forward. You'd have to resubmit it. Does that make sense?
That's a key point. I said if the governor submits something
A tie
that
would be a rejection.
if the governor submits something that we don't agree with for whatever reason, then the process is that he would be able to resubmit after additional negotiation and come to an agreement of what could be a consensus then. So it's an orderly process, and it tides us over during the time until we come back into session. It's somewhat analogous to the structure we set up during COVID, if you'll recall. So that was a model for what we put in the bill this
These are new
time.
provisions, this approval, this is sort of supplemental to the constitutional provisions. Will the governor still have to declare a fiscal emergency in order to spend that?
That will happen on Wednesday and Thursday, the declaration of fiscal emergency.
Representative Candelora, you had a question about some of the latitude, right? You're supporting the plan to put the money in, but you don't want the governor to make the call to do that. Is that what you sent something out on Friday to that effect?
Well, the way it is set up is it's enumerated for federal cuts, essentially, that it's to be used for, and there's a laundry list of about 6 items that the governor can identify. So our caucus didn't want to have broad latitude. And then we were also concerned, make sure it expires when we go into regular session, so the legislature takes back over its role when we're back in regular session.
So I understand that health care is included in that list of items?
Healthcare is included.
It says
in that
healthcare.
list.
Governor, are you inclined, if necessary, to use some of that money to supplement the Affordable Care Act subsidies that might run out or be diminished starting January 1st?
I think it's too early to say. I hope people hold tough and make sure that we keep ACA going as it is, and we don't have to raise people's rates early in the new year.
What can be done about that? I mean, we're hearing from people whose premiums have jumped dramatically. Can Connecticut tackle that in addition to SNAP benefits?
We're supporting our federal congressional delegation to fight for keeping those subsidies in place. That is the best outcome, and then hopefully we can keep the votes in D.C. for that.
The entirety of the subsidies is $350 million per year. So that gives you some perspective of what that would be if the state had to bear all of that. And so I think the governor, lieutenant governor are right. You're hoping the federal government can step in and handle this for you.
Did you say that's for a year?
1 year is $350 million.
That's what it would cost
Correct.
the state to.
Correct. And so California, you can imagine what it would cost them. Yeah.
On the time frame, Governor, just so I understand, in other words, it's mentioned several times here the start of the next session. If for some reason the shutdown ends, et cetera, and you don't need to spend this $500, does the $500 expire on the first day of the next session? Or is there a time frame written in on the $500 million?
When the next session begins, if there's any money left over from that 500 goes to pay down pension.
On the healthcare subsidies, it does look like we're heading towards a resolution where those may not be extended.
June 30?
June 30th would go. So it goes in the budget reserve fund until June 30, 2026.
Right.
Bingo.
Yep.
On the healthcare subsidies, is there a date where you're thinking about where the state may just have to take action? Because it looks like we may be headed towards a resolution where the subsidies aren't extended, or if the shutdown continues, there's just no clarity. People are hoping to know by the end of the year because they have to sign up. So I know we're waiting to see, but is there a date where the state, just like SNAP, is going to have to make a decision?
We've certainly told folks when it comes to re-rolling on the exchange, wait, because we'll have a lot more clarity in 3 weeks than we have today. I'm very hopeful that the feds are going to come up with a solution that doesn't penalize our people, at which point maybe they'll extend the enrollment period into January if it takes them a little longer to be able to get that clarified.
And can you set the record straight about something? Did the federal government give Connecticut money and want it back? What is that about?
Well, Sue, they've changed their mind on that about 6 times.
Welcome
but
to our
basically, you got the reserve money. That pays for about 2/3 of the SNAP benefits for the month of November. We use that. And the state backstopped the other 1/3, which is, I don't know, $28 million, just so everybody knew they had a full SNAP payment for the month of November.
Could you guys give us the 6 broad enumerated topics? We've heard healthcare, obviously food assistance seems to be part of it.
LIHEAP is in there.
LIHEAP is in. Yep.
Okay, so we got.
We can get it after. We get the actual language for you.
Matt, could you walk through, I found this useful when you and I spoke the other day, just the back of the napkin math, starting with the number 500, going to February, LIHEAP, SNAP, WIC, potentially healthcare subsidies. How fast could that 500 be spent in the full freight?
Yeah, if you were doing all of LIHEAP and WIC, all of SNAP and WIC alone, that's probably $74 million right there. Right. LIHEAP, you could be into the 80s, so a month. So, Vinny actually said to me, it's about $100 million a month spend, probably at the high end. Right. Now, the subsidies are a different conversation. I acknowledge that because that's 350, but that's kind of where the number came up to, was about $100 million, probably worst case scenario.
A year?
Per month.
Per month.
So we out of the fund, if the shutdown had continued, that's where we got up to.
Treasurer Russell, could you please explain to us how this plan comports with the state's obligations under its bond covenants?
So this will be under the extraordinary circumstances declaration of the governor, which then essentially puts that covenant aside. What we are doing is what was built into the budget was $1.2 billion of additional contribution out of that volatility cap into the fund. There will be, even with this, another $300 million or so on top of that will be committed. So it's in line with the broader guardrails, but this is one of the exemptions based on extraordinary circumstances because of the volatility in Washington.
Is it likely that this $500 million we put up we'll ever see again, or that is just we put it up and it takes care of hopefully 3 months or whatever and we move on?
That's going to be something that's determined over time. A lot of this is going to be dependent on what's happening in Washington. And as was said, is if there was money in that in the fund past the end of the session, it would go through the normal waterfall of the guardrails that would then budget reserve fund and then use to pay down debt.
Governor, going back to Susan's questions on the Federal Reserve SNAP money, is your message to the feds right now essentially like what, like don't give these backseas? We gave it out, you can't get it back no matter what you say?
I can't make any predictions about the federal government. I can tell you that unlike other states, we backfilled that extra 1/3. So it's not like the feds can take that money back. We didn't use their money. We used our money to backfill that. I'd like to think it's going to get refreshed and replenished once they end this shutdown, but time will tell.
And that 1/3 was spent in the same manner that you got the $3 million for food share payments?
That's essentially right. We'll bring that up certainly as part of this $500 million when we're in session in a couple of days.
Governor, earlier in the discussions about establishing this contingency fund or emergency response fund, you stated even last week, that your priority was taking care of federal funding that was jeopardized by the shutdown. Now this seems to be expanded. Now we're talking about programs that could be affected by budget cutbacks that were approved earlier this year. Can you walk us through your thinking?
The most timely things right now are related to the shutdown. That could be solved in 72 hours. It could be solved in 72 days. And so that's what we need to do on a timely basis, focused on that $500 million. Next up is the subsidies on the exchange. That could go away on January 1. I certainly hope it does, and I hope people hang tough on that. The big, beautiful bill and other things that could impact people, we'll have time to deal with that in the regular session in February.
Can you give us an update on food share? I would imagine you've had some conversations with them. I know that they're struggling trying to fill shelves.
Food share is done magnificent. And between Jason and Andrea getting that going as quickly as we did, serving 3 million meals just last week alone, doing it again this week, doing it again the week thereafter, making sure we're there to backstop SNAP, since SNAP was sort of an on-again, off-again thing. But it's tragic looking at the people waiting in line at the food banks, desperate for food. The number of people aren't getting paid who are working. So that's what we wanted to step up, and that's what we did.
When you made the announcement, I believe, at Food Share, they said that the $3 million would only go 2 weeks. So is that accurate? And do they need more?
Yes. We're going to continue it another 2 weeks, at least through November. And then, Washington, please get your act together and make the deal.
And if I could just say about SNAP, so SNAP's the most important factor in feeding people, because SNAP provides 9 meals for every 1 that the food banks do. The food banks are supplemental to the SNAP, and I have to just say it's been very scary to go to food banks around the state and look at empty shelves. So thank heaven SNAP money is on people's cards.
One thing I might add regarding the health care subsidies. You noticed last night the Republican Senate leadership said that they would allow the Democratic senators to have a vote on their proposal in December. What that leads me to think is that the Republicans would want to come up with their own proposal and vote it before that, because they wouldn't want to be exposed to a naked vote, I think, with no plan in place, where the Democrats would propose full restoration of those benefits and the Republicans would vote no. I mean, they may be hard-hearted and cruel enough to do that, but I think it's likely that they will come up with something before that that they can pass to try to immunize themselves from what the Democratic vote would be. Then the big question, I think, is with the House of Representatives, U.S. House of Representatives. Would they then go along with what had passed as an immunization measure by the U.S. Senate? So there are a whole lot of questions for us to be resolved between now and the end of the year. I think obviously if we go over the cliff entirely and there is no extension of those benefits at the end of the year, as current law provides. What that puts on the table, I think, for us, and we go back into session, is raising the issue once again of a public option in Connecticut. Because what are we going to do? We could pay that $350 million to start with, but we also have to have other ongoing options for people who need health care, and if they're completely abandoned by the federal government, we'll need a Connecticut solution.
How do you feel about that, Governor?
I think we do one step at a time. We have a lot on our plate, but I'll just say in conclusion, Jason and Food Share and Andrea getting food to people on an incredibly timely basis, what they're able to do to get the SNAP cards going just this weekend. We saw how desperate people were. Really proud of working with Marty and Vin and Matt and Eric and Susan and I, able to put this together. Contrast that with a lot of the noise you see out of Washington, D.C. We're working together to take care of people. So thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Vinny, real quick, are you whipping this vote? If so, how much of your caucus do you expect will support this on?
No, and I think, I just talked about this. We're not whipping the caucus. I think we caucused last week. It was a very different place. So as we see the next couple days play out, I could envision if the federal government is voting to reopen, we are going to have people saying we don't need this fund anymore. So I think it's going to be fluid, but there will be some Republican support.
Where is the Senate Republicans on this? I mean, we got everybody but the Senate Republicans.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to answer.
No, I've spoken to Senator Harding, and I think he has the same position. I think we all emphatically supported this concept last week, certainly. And as we're starting to see some openings of the federal government, I think you're going to see Republicans sort of cautious, do we really need to do this? And I think this legislation puts a lot of faith in the governor to have to make sure that he's using it to mitigate the shutdown. And I think that's generally what Republicans' concerns are. We don't want to see it becoming a long-term slush fund, and that's why it's written the way it is.
I just want to make sure it's a vote of 4-2 to pass anything on this committee of the leadership.
To reject.
To reject. That's fine, excuse me, to reject.
Vinny.
So it's 4-2.
And you need 91 votes on Wednesday in the House,
and,
given the emergency declaration to comply with the
Have you had
Congress.
pressure from some of your constituents that SNAP benefits are too generous? I mean, those are some of the comments that I get. What kind of pushback or
No,
feedback?
I mean, I have to say, I have not gotten pushback. In general, I think people are all concerned. I think part of the conversation we're hearing is we've seen a balloon over the last 4 years of a 40% increase of SNAP, and I think all of us probably agree it's not a good thing when people have to rely on government for their services. The safety net is very important, but we want to make sure we're lifting people up out of poverty in the state of Connecticut. And if we're going in that wrong direction, we have to have a broader conversation. I think that's sort of the general concern. But no, I will say that across party lines, people have been supportive.
But right now we have an emergency.
Absolutely.
Are we trying to use some of that money for the infrastructure of the cities? Is some of that money going towards the cities? Because our cities are definitely going down. It's demising. And mental health is an issue as well. And the war on drugs is another issue.
This money is fairly specific to 6 or 7 purposes, mainly related to the shutdown and people who have immediate need when it comes to food and heat.
Okay, because mental health does be a big part of people need.
There's actually a bill on mental health for taking up as well.
That's right.
Yeah.
Children's mental health is addressed
Yes.
in what will be taken up.
Governor,
Thank
can
you.
we just ask real quick on some of the shutdown stuff. What conversations are you having with the Connecticut Airport Authority, the Tweed Authority, on any flight delays here in Connecticut, cancellations related to the shutdown?
I think so far we seem to, it's the bigger airports are the ones where the Secretary of Transportation is cutting back. I think so far, if I've heard secondhand, we've been in pretty good shape at Bradley and Tweed. Thanks, everybody.
My parents are flying in today.